You can adjust your strategy all the time, but you shouldn't really be adjusting your culture all the time, because people like to connect with culture, and culture is there to stay. I'm here today to share with you some thoughts on leadership, culture, values. I'll be introducing to you two frameworks which I consider very important, but let me set the scene first. At the BDR Thermea group, we decided to work on the culture work stream because we had to grow quite rapidly. And what do? We're a company that, of course, is part of the energy transition, and we create smart thermal heating and cooling solutions. So we're very much in the space of how you heat your houses and your offices, and we're into the heat pumps, we're into the CO2 reduction. It's a very challenging environment, both logistically, but also from a people perspective, of course, because it is a very technical company. So how do you attract people? Before I continue to say what we did with the culture program that we did during COVID, actually, the lockdown, I just want to say one thing that we all know, and I'm a big believer in these simple statements. And the statement that I want to share is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So I thought about it long and hard when I was asked to set out on the journey of let's create our culture and values, because we need to grow the company and we need to come together. And we're present in 104 countries, and we have 22 manufacturing sites in different countries, from the US to Asia to Europe. And the US, actually, we had to say goodbye at some stage during that COVID period as well, for lots of reasons. So lots of stuff happening. And I thought about it long and hard. What does it actually mean? But what it means actually is that you can adjust your strategy all the time, but you shouldn't really be adjusting your culture all the time, because people like to connect with culture, and culture is there to stay. So if culture is there to stay, why would we run a culture program and develop a culture and find values? Probably, I thought, the culture is there. It's probably very healthy because we're doing really well as a company, even during COVID, struggling with the crisis management. We are still able to continue as a company and be a healthy company. So maybe what we should do is do it differently and start searching for what is there and see how can we extrapolate that. For that, for that thought, I started thinking with my team, because you never do it on your own, and lots of gratitude goes to, and thank you goes to my HR team, the consultants, the leaders. It was a big thing. I decided to introduce the change framework. So maybe we can hit the next slide and have a look at that change framework, because that really led the entire space of what we did. My slide's not changing, so I hope the slide is changing for the others. Yeah, great. The change framework, it's a very simple framework, and it's one that is very helpful. So instead of projectizing the culture program, thinking about all the things we should do, I started working with my team on, we're going to do something that's going to change things for people, but it's not necessarily changing maybe what we've got as a culture. It's maybe finding the culture and then allowing it to tell us what it is that we've got. So what we need to do is we need to have a change framework that does a lot of seeing and understanding first. Let's go out and look and see what we've got. Let's all try to understand it, to move on to framing and choosing. Once you've got all your qualitative data, and maybe hopefully some quantitative data as well, you need to sort of start putting it into boxes, creating a mutual understanding, and then make some choices. And that's where leaders come in. They need to help make those choices, because we were talking about leadership here as well, of course. And then once we've got that sorted, we just need to get going, and we need to move, and we need to do stuff, and we need to internalize it, and we need to put it into practice. We need to keep it up, and we need to continuously learn and improve. And that's the circle that we go through. So we use this framework of always seeing and understanding, framing, choosing, get going and moving. Yeah, and we're still on this slide for a little bit, because one of the things that I usually say to people is, we have this tendency to go to get going and moving. Let's find the stuff, let's sort it. Mine is a company, we're not a consultancy. And in companies, we move towards delivery, we move towards results. So one of the most challenging things is to keep all your managers, your leaders, and your people in the seeing and understanding. So how did we do that? Let's hit the next slide. So what we see here is, hold on, my slide's a bit covered here. So what we see here is actually the steps in how we went about it. Very interesting, we said, in the seeing and understanding, we're going to try and touch all our people. We're going to listen to everybody, show respect and talk to them. And I think our previous presenter also spoke about talking. Well, here we go. We said, we're not just going to assume that we know at the top what will be necessary. We're going to ask the people to talk to us. So we set out a survey called the Barrett Values Survey. And I'll talk a little bit about that model a little bit later. That was a lot of seeing. And then we said, when we got all the results, which was about three questions only. The first question being, what are your personal values? What are the current values in the company? And the third question was, what should the desired values be in our company to determine our culture? Once we got all the results back, we said, so what do we do? Because we have a lot of insights now. So we brought together virtually, like today, all our managers and leaders who have people reporting into them, and we created virtual lunch and learn workshops to make sense of the pile of qualitative data and to involve all the people. By that time, we already created a movement and a buzz, even virtually. And of course, it's nice if you can come together, but remember, it was COVID, we were growing, and we did need to really revamp our culture and our company values to understand what we've had all this time and what are the good parts and what are the parts that maybe aren't so clear. So we tried to bring all these people together and they made sense of it together. The framing and choosing started. We prioritized and we went all the way around in the circle to finally get going and moving. And that is very interesting because it says trust there as well. And with the get going and moving part, we also said, it's very important that there is only one set of company values internally and externally. So when we go outside to our clients, we shouldn't really have a different set of values. They should be the same. We should trust our values. We should trust each other. We should trust the client that we all understand what we are about and that we all understand these values. So again, there was a very important role for all the leaders to support this, because very often the marketeers say, well, I want to tweak it a little bit. And then the people who are more on the process or in the function say, well, I need it to be a little bit different. So the circle of bringing everybody along and allowing those voices was quite important. One of the things that I'm going to zoom in on in a later slide is the movement where we bring in leaders and how we bring in the leaders. By the time we got there, though, imagine there's about 7,000 people in the company globally. We had touched the people in the manufacturing sites, we had touched the people in every country, and we had touched the people in every function. And there was a buzz, a virtual buzz, and we needed to communicate. So the other key thing here that was very important in this project, but not on this slide, because I didn't want to do death by slides, I'd like you to put some questions out there now, or maybe some observations in the chat that I can react to, because I'm sure it's triggering thoughts in your minds because you're all professionals listening in. So all of this required really great communication skills. And we were very fortunate that we had just revamped our intranet. So we started using all the results, the intranet, the lunch and learn sessions, anything that we could think of to engage with people. And we asked our people to reach out to us and to participate in workshops. So the other thing that's here, and that should be here, and it's not on the slide because, again, I didn't want to create too many slides, is the underlying need of great communication skills. Nobody's a mind reader, and especially not in a period of time where we were in lockdown and you were sitting in the house and you didn't have the coffee room chats or the quick, walks during lunchtime chats. So it was really important for us to involve all the people through great communication. So let's move to the next slide. And this is the Barrett values model. So there were two things that were driving the idea behind how to tackle this. It was the change model and the Barrett. We chose to work with Barrett because it was simple and it was easy. And let me share what I consider simple and easy. I'm not sure about any of you, but if I would ask you the question today, can you name me all the values that you've got in your company? Most people will start mentioning 1, 2, maybe 3 values, and then sometimes they go like, I think we have a 4th or a 5th, or maybe there's another one, or we used to have. So simple means actually that you don't create too many values, because that's quite confusing. And when you ask your colleague, very often they don't really remember all of them, or they don't really know what the meaning is. So Barrett was very specific in saying, you should basically not create too many values. You should create the values that are there and that are necessary for your company to deliver the growth that you are looking for today, for tomorrow, and into the future. That should be sustainable because we're an energy transition company. So this is the reverse of, or this is the Maslow theory behind it. The Barrett Values Center says the first value should represent the foundation in a company. The second one should be around evolution, and the third one should be around impact. So foundation is about all the benefits are in place financially, you know what's happening. You've got reasonably good relationships with your colleagues. You know what you need to deliver. The basics are in good shape, and that value should represent that the foundation is clear to everybody what it is. The next one should go up one level, and it's about evolution. It's where you start to learn together, where you transform, where you reach out to each other. And then at the third level, the impact level, we should really reflect a little bit, because what it says there is, first, at that level, we should come together and we should share our vision. We should collaborate across functions, across boundaries. Diversity, inclusion becomes hugely important. We should respect, unite, recognize, thank people, and then we will be able to contribute to the outside world, and we will be really impactful for our customers. So we set out to do that with the Barrett values model, and we spent quite some time explaining that to the managers and asking managers, do you agree? So we started looking for commitment. We started looking for commitment also with the management board, our ExCom, to ensure that this would not derail halfway through and we would end up with 4, 5, or 6 values, which are so difficult to remember. So let's hit the next slide. So what was, I think, quite special is that we didn't start at the top. As a result of the change model, seeing, understanding, touching all the people, emerge and change, the Barrett values, let's look at what's there, but also see if we can find things at the 3 levels of the Barrett values model. And so what we said is, dear management board, executive committee, can you let us do the work and engage with our entire workforce and show them respect, because some of them have been with the company for a long time, some people are newer, etc., etc. So we ran the survey with their support. We did the people managers workshops virtually. We held, GLT is the global leadership team, which is the executive extended team. We did a workshop with them on the results, start engaging. They had discussions and dialogues with the people in their countries, in their functions. They started showing up as leaders. And they started showing up, not only did they start showing up as leaders with personal stories around what they'd seen, what they'd experienced, engaging with people, they started communicating also about what they wanted for the company and how they wanted to achieve it. So it actually created a huge positive leadership buzz, which wasn't at all like a leadership training. It was really appealing to them as human beings and saying, how would you show up? And that's where they started understanding there's so much already in the company. There are so many answers already with our people, because look at all this material. And all we need to do is engage on that material and see how we can internalize it jointly. So then we brought all that stuff to the management board, the executive board, and we asked them, can you lean back? And can you absorb what your company already is doing? Can you absorb the richness of the feedback? And can you see the engagement of all your people? And can you see what the buzz is doing? And I think the executive committee had to think about it a little bit, because they're quite surprised. We, by that time, had nice cartoon movies. We had all kinds of materials already. And they were like, but what is the outcome? What is the outcome? What are the values? Aren't the values the most important? And then we said, well, the values you can tweak, but the fact that you are listening to all the feedback and all the feed forward and all the thoughts of everybody in the company is actually more important. And so we arrived at the 3 values with the help of the executive committee, everybody listening to each other. Now, this is not a fairy tale story, so by the time we end today, I'm quite happy to share with you the learnings and the things that went wrong as well. But I'm talking about the 2 models and the ideas about around emergent change and engagement and showing respect to your entire workforce, because nobody gets up in the morning to do the wrong thing. Everybody gets up in the morning to do the right thing. So this whole culture thing virtually was about, let us use that simple thought. We're all trying to do our best. And then we went top down again. So what you see basically is bottom up and top down, and the circle goes round and round. And what we saw happening after this process, which took about a year, is that it's going through different cycles now, and everybody has been engaging with it and feels they participate. So there are now values awards, which we didn't launch as HR necessarily, because the people wanted those things to be launched. We saw young women standing up and saying, we'd like to have mentoring groups because the values are so appealing, but I'm also struggling as a female person in this company because it's so technical. What can we do? So what it ignited was a lot of initiatives, even in a virtual environment where we didn't go to the office all the time. And I think it went further than we potentially even anticipated. And it brought a lot of energy also to the younger people in the company, which is the future of the company. So it had some really great side effects. And you see some numbers here that we were able to do 48 workshops by July. The program had started in February. By July that year, we did 48 workshops with 3 HR people. 3 HR people. That's huge. That's really a lot of recognition went to these people and how they organized it. And then we had 300 participants at that time, and that spread because 300 people touch twice the number of that people, touch twice the number of that number of people. So that's how we did it. And there were all kinds of learnings. And because of the change model, remember, going through seeing, understanding, framing, choosing, get going, moving, learning, and then implementing your learnings in the next cycle. Because we went all the way up and all the way down, every workshop that was held passed on the learnings to the next workshop as well. And the leaders were forced in a way to sit back and learn to listen, which is a great leadership skill, of course. How do you absorb what's going on versus how do you tell people what your message is? And how do you bring what you hear into your message so you connect with people in a respectful way on what is important to them as much as it is important to you and the company. What's in it for me? What's in it for them? Okay, let's hit the next slide. Internal, external, I mentioned it already, the same set of values. Let me reveal the values then. There we go. Next slide. On the left, 14 topics from the Barrett Values Center were selected as crucially important. These were the results of the survey. They were the results of the management workshops, the GLT workshops, and finally it came to the board. And this is what the board saw with all the stories and the anecdotes and the cartoons and a little bit of the movies. And we said, this is what people think. And very interesting, you see 13 employee recognition and 14 employee engagement. Fascinating, isn't it? It's also because that's where the company's at. It is a company that came into existence because there were so many different family-owned companies at the origin and the birth of the BDR Thermea group that you actually see that coming together meant adaptability was required. So that was a very important value at that moment in time when we took the survey. Balance, because we were in the COVID period. Collaboration, because we needed to grow and people were struggling to get work done because there were supply chain issues. We needed to improve our products because we needed to invent the hydrogen boiler. Customer satisfaction, because we're the third largest boiler producer in the world. So how are we going to chase the others? All that type of stuff. So you could actually see a strong focus on business from our own people. But at the end, what really was very fascinating also was the teamwork, employee recognition, and employee engagement, making it into that list of 14. And then we cooked it up and it came out as customer focus, one team, and a sustainable future. And that's where the journey starts, the journey of storytelling, the journey of being authentic, and the journey of sharing what does it mean in the BDR Thermea world to have customer focus. Because we all have customer focus, we understand that. So it's not about the value being customer focus and it explains itself. It's about the journey we go on of seeing and understanding what customer focus means, framing and choosing in customer focus what are the things that we need to do at what stage of our strategy, and then get going and moving. So in the strategy, our customer focus may change, but the value of customer focus will not change. One team, at certain moments in time, one team may mean something else than it means today. Today it meant, let's all work together as countries, because we're still very separate. We have big brands in France, Baxi, we have brands in Germany, we have brands in the Netherlands, Romania. How do we become this one team? How do we benefit from this being this corporate, but not having one brand like our competitors, Vaillant's? So what does one team mean? So loading that picture of one team and trying to ensure that the company was growing was very important. And then last but not least, this is of course at the heart of everything we do, a sustainable future for you as an individual. How do we allow our people to learn? It's internally focused and it's externally focused. Sustainable future, how do we contribute to the energy transition? And the energy transition is big because many people don't know, but 30% of CO2 reduction could be coming from our type of company. Heating and cooling in houses and buildings, there's lots more CO2 challenges than there is in the automotive industry, for example. So these were big, and what you see is that's what we were working on. So what did it look like when we celebrated? Next slide. Celebration, very important, recognition. Finally, when everybody got together, we were able to have the people in the room in different countries. We celebrated a values day for the first time in the history of the company, which was dispersed, many companies coming together. And we celebrated it, and people started telling stories about what it was that they saw others do and what they do themselves. Today, it's an integral part of the business strategy. I don't claim it as HR. I think it's completely and entirely business-owned. The management board is driving it. It's part of every slide they produce. It's there all the time. So that's the success part of the story. And I'm going to stop here because hopefully we have some questions, because it wasn't all easy, of course. And I'm sorry, this is home working. My doorbell is ringing. So I'm just going to answer that for a second. And maybe there's a question or a comment.
Indeed, ladies and gentlemen, so please put your questions to the comment box or either the chat box or Q&A box.
Okay. Okay. Are there Are there any questions or slides? And whilst you're thinking about it, maybe one of the things that I like to share is learnings, because you could see the sustaining change and the learning. One of the learnings was it's really important to virtually keep communicating. I mentioned it up front, and what we'd done, we thought about it carefully. We created a sounding board, so we didn't use the regular way of running a project where you'd have KPIs and you'd present to a steering committee. Instead, we asked people to join us in a sounding board, and we made sure that people joined us from all layers of the company, but also all different countries. And the sounding board helped us look at all the materials step by step all the time. And that was hugely successful. But one thing we underestimated, because we did go to the executive committee and ask them to support us in running the project this way, we didn't have somebody from the executive committee in the sounding board. And retrospectively, that was a bit of a hiccup, because when all the information came to the executive committee, it was an overwhelming amount of information. And of course, we'd kept them up to date. And I'd spoken to my CEO all the time, and we'd had all these informal chats by video conference, etc. Retrospectively, I would say the most inclusive way to do it is actually also to bring in one of the executive team members, because inclusion is everybody. And the reason why we didn't, though, was because we thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if all the extended executive team would feel so empowered to do stuff that they empower their managers who empower their people. And that was sort of trying to break an old traditional style company into being more modern and engaging and more open and transparent and trusting. And so it delivered an effect, but there was a counter effect where I think we had to do some repairs around the final steps of this program. And I see here, how much of the data have you shown to the management when you took your collection to the leaders, in what form? Well, you try and make it digestible. So what we did, of course, we created an executive summary. And in the executive summary, we said what we find is that people's personal values are very much aligned with the 10 values that they have chosen for the desired company value. But what we see in the middle is that the values that they feel we currently have, because one of the values actually was that we were a cost-driven company, which is not a value. That's a concern. That's a big issue. And we brought those types of conclusions to them. Those conclusions are quite harsh. So what that also created was a desire for the executive board to dig into some of the detail of the data, which we allowed them to do, and we did give them access to the full set of data. And this is why there was a learning where I said, I think we should have taken them along a little bit more on the content earlier on. But we made an executive summary with some of the key big findings, trying to make sure also that we got to something that would help us drive the company internally, but also help us really become a winning company on the outside, or remain a winning company on the outside. Are values purely aspirational, or are they values that people get fired for violating? Interesting. Is it a stick or is it a carrot? Is it a stick or is it a carrot? Well, let's put it this way. I think the values, they should be part of everyday conversation. I don't think they should be something where you create the 2 moments in time when you do your performance management discussion, where you should create, sort of a stick-like approach where you say, well, you didn't live up to. So it should be something that should be called out all the time. Are you collaborating with me, or are you pushing back? And if you're pushing back, are you pushing back for a reason? Those types of questions are really important in daily conversations, and that's how I feel the group values should be used. They should really give you a sense of how do I make decisions? Is this going to benefit a sustainable future, or is it going to slow us down? Am I really delivering value to my team member or my customer? or am I doing this because of another reason? So I don't believe that it should be something that when you violate, it should get you fired. You should be there before you get to that stage. That said, I do think it is a celebration of a company's culture, and if done properly, and if managers are authentic in how they demonstrate these behaviors, you should, of course, be able to call out behavior that isn't really in line and have a great conversation, and ideally not during the 1 or 2 performance discussions you have, but on a daily basis even, I would say. Have you described a behavioral framework sitting behind your values to support conversations, appraisal, etc.? No, we have not, because that's a lot of admin, and I hate admin. But what we have done, we've created a nice open space personal development plan sheet that says what's going well, what can go better, what would you like to do? And then we've given a little bit of a view on how we as HR think the ideal personal development plan should look like, because we are a technical company and people do like examples. So there were some examples that were created so that people could get an idea. And in those examples, of course, we didn't just talk about the delivery on target of goals that are really measurable, but we also spoke about the behaviors of customer focus, one team, and a sustainable future, and how that should appear. And then the journey starts of continuous feed forward and really making sure that the company and all the people in it get the time to get acclimatized to this is how we do things around here.